thought he would be a path to domination over others and not liberation. In the same vein, the only people in paradise who are having a good time right now are the worshippers we see who trapped Anaxes. By revolting against their masters, they earned the chance to stay in the nice part of paradise, but it's natural order for Cathatet to eventually crush that revolution. Through the Xarxes, Mehrunes showed Mankar exactly what Cameron needed to see to get the ball rolling. If you compare the Mythic Dawn commentaries to an actual translation of the Mythic Dawn, you find that Mankar actually caught quite a bit of information out of the book. This is because he was proactive, so he needed a lot more than what Martin needed, as Martin was reactive. Note that the characterization of Mehrunes Dagon isn't exactly that outlandish. Mehrunes opposed religion, hell-bent on maintaining themselves and their status quo. Yet despite having opportunities in the past to invade Morrowind, his antics never went too far. Then again, it was the Tribunal, and that's Morrowind lore, so it doesn't bear debating here. Mehrunes could have invaded Tamriel at any time the Dragonfires weren't lit. Remember when I mentioned that Tiber Septim had to get the Amulet of Kings off the body of Riemann III? Yeah, Riemann's death marked the end of the First Era, and Tiber Septim's conquest marked the beginning of the Third Era. Put 2 and 2 together, and that's almost 900 years of Mehrunes Dagon having the door open and doing nothing with it. Of course, there's the ESO lore that Molag Bal copied the plot of Oblivion and invaded Tamriel in the Second Era, but ESO isn't canon to Oblivion, and you just have to accept that.
While the prophecy of the Nerevarine can be interpreted as the end of the Tribunal, I have always seen it as a prediction of hope and peace.
With this recontextualization in mind, the main quest goes from mediocre to mind-blowing. Why did the Daedra invade Kvatch but fail to take the chapel, the one thing they came there to do? To motivate Martin into rebelling against the tyranny of Cameron. Why didn't the enemy take steps to stop us from completing the ritual, to make it possible? Why did the siege engine take 15 minutes to emerge from the portal, so we could get the sigil stone? Why did Mehrunes Dagon delay his invasion of the Imperial City until after Martin's arrival? To ensure that Martin would be forced to sacrifice himself, mantle Akatosh, and end the Septim Dynasty. The only problem with this is, it's super subtle. Mehrunes Dagon didn't have a single voice line in the entire game, so we're never given the impression that he's actually playing both sides of the conflict. Morrowind didn't sit the player down and force them to read every interpretation of the murder of Nerevar for people to love that questline, so the fact that most people don't even consider this plot point when discussing Oblivion is a good sign that we may have gone too far in a few places in terms of subtlety. I can't help but feel that most of the pieces are here for this to have been an amazing story. I mean, Kirk Coleman started the series with Redguard and still contributes at Bethesda. Ken Ralston wrote Morrowind's main quest, and they had Michael Kirkbride on hand willing to handle the higher lore concepts. And given that they were willing to pay for not 1 but 3 celebrity voice cameos for this one quest line, you would think that it would have been a priority at Bethesda to make sure that this was the best quest line in the game. Instead, most people just like to brag that they've never done Oblivion's main quest. And people who do play Oblivion's main quest tend to write it off as a boring and generic story, in large part because you can get all the pieces together for a good story, but if you never actually place them all on the board for the player to see, then the only people who are really going to get it are detailed focused nerds like myself. Finally, we arrive at Martin's character. A common interpretation of Martin's character is that he is the chosen one of the story, a twist on the Nerevarine story by taking that role away from the player. Less common, in fact a rarity, is any interpretation which states who chose Martin. The Nerevarine was chosen by Azura for the purpose of ending Dagothr and the False Tribunal, and the Dragonborn was chosen by Akatosh for the purpose of reminding Alduin of his role in the mythos as a destroyer, not as a dominator. The question is, who chose Martin, and for what purpose? One might think Akatosh. After all, Martin is a priest of Akatosh. Eldamil prays to Akatosh for Mankar's defeat, and Akatosh shows up after the amulet is sacrificed to defeat Mehrunes Dagon. So case closed, right? Here's the thing. If you read about the origin of the Amulet of Kings, discounting the stuff from ESO that ties with the lore canon, the amulet is said to originate from Akatosh's heart when he made a compact with Alesia that would prevent the invasion of Daedra and Tamriel as long as the Dragonborn sat on the throne and maintained the Dragonfires. First, we have to ask the question of how Akatosh accomplishes this, which is speculation of course, but what mechanism of Akatosh enables him to prevent the hostile invasion of Daedra? Akatosh, and by extension the dragons and Jills as well, represent time, and each of those aspects generally has a role to play in its maintenance. The Jills sweep up the mess of dragon breaks when an event occurs involving divinity that temporarily reverts an area to non-linear time. A dragon break is how both Orsinium was founded and Mannimarco ascended to godhood at the end of Daggerfall, despite the impossibility of that being the case. Their departure from Atmora caused it to freeze over, both literally and figuratively. In any case, Akatosh's main domain is time, so it's possible that Akatosh isn't blocking Tamrielic invasions as much as he's delaying them to the end of linear time, which begs the next question: why is Akatosh playing this role, and what is his motivation to do so? This gets into a really complicated discussion of Tamrielic lore and religious interpretations about the relationship between Akatosh and Lorkhan. Look, if you want my opinion on this, make an Elder Scrolls game set in that era. You don't have to concretely answer what happened, just boil it down to a couple clean theories. In any event, Akatosh was apparently the one responsible for the death of Lorkhan, if such a thing is even believed to have happened, and this event generally marks the schism in most belief structures in Tamriel. It makes sense for the Elvish believers of Akatosh who knew him as Ariel to claim that Ariel was responsible for the death of Lorkhan, considering they are all very, very mad about that mortality thing that Lorkhan did. However, given that Lorkhan was considered a hero to men, it's hard to believe that Akatosh would become the effective head of the Imperial Pantheon under this narrative. It's possible that we have a situation similar to the interpretation some people have of Judas Iscariot. It's classically believed by most Christians that Judas was a traitor to Jesus. However, a minority of people believe that Jesus actually intended for Judas to play this role in the story, and Judas is in fact the most loyal of Jesus' apostle for his sacrifice. In the same vein, it's possible that Akatosh is worshipped by men because he played the critical role in the murder of Lorkhan, which Lorkhan intended to have happen from the beginning. The Aedra are generally considered to have gotten a raw deal out of convention, having been promised to be lords of Mundus while the Daedra got to be lords of their own planes without a fraction of the sacrifice. If Mankar were correct that Lorkhan is a Daedra and that Tamriel is his plane of oblivion, then it doesn't stand to reason that Akatosh would bother to protect it. However, a case could be made that Akatosh is protecting Mundus from oblivion as atonement for his transgression against Lorkhan, and that the end of time represents the point at which Akatosh is forgiven. Now that we have the how and why of Akatosh covered, we have to answer the final question. If Mehrunes Dagon intended for this outcome, why would he do so in a way that would end the Daedra's ability to invade Tamriel? This is where we introduce the concept of mantling, which is super important in the story of the Shivering Isles and why I think they handled it the way they did. In Elder Scrolls, it is generally considered to be possible for a mortal being to become a god. This is seen in three big instances: the Dwemer, Tiber Septim, and the Tribunal. However, this isn't as straightforward as meeting a few conditions and having a switch flipped for you. Rather, the process of becoming a divine is usually destructive to the person who undergoes that process. The Dwemer, when they mantled as a race, disappeared from existence and arguably became the godlike Golem Numidium. Tiber Septim went on to mantle Shor/Lorkhan, and the Tribunal went on to mantle Azura, Mephala, and Boethia, although arguably they failed as they attempted to retain their personalities in this process. In this game, I would argue that Martin, with the combined souls of all the Dragonborn who had lit the Dragonfires before him, mantled Akatosh in this scene. The biggest piece of evidence for this is actually Skyrim, where the player is the first Dragonborn to have been created in millennia, and whose main plot required this event to have occurred. With Akatosh replaced and suddenly more active in the world stage, Martin can confidently make the promise that the Oblivion gates are closed forever. At least, the hostile gates are closed forever. Yet Mehrunes Dagon and the other less friendly princes are still active in the world after Oblivion. Let's look at it like this. Mehrunes Dagon did not wish to conquer or destroy Tamriel, as is feared by the mortals. Rather, Mehrunes Dagon wanted to create the circumstances that the traitor Akatosh would be mantled, so that Akatosh would get off his couch and actually start doing his job again, and stop using the Dragonborn for that purpose. Molag Bal and Jiggalag are pretty much the only guys around that would actually bother to invade other places for the purposes of controlling them. So who chose Martin? I don't think it was Akatosh. I think it was Mehrunes Dagon. I think that Boris's line, if he survives to the end, sums up the story best.
The scholars and priests can debate what happened to Martin in the end.
A lot of the iniquities with Oblivion's main quest can be boiled down to this. Ken Rolston decided to take a hands-off approach when it came to writing Oblivion. Michael Kirkbride was not as involved in the project as a writer. Kirk Coleman did a good job of creating quests to the specification of his bosses, and it was ultimately Todd Howard that looked at this quest line and saw none of the problems. To quote Ken Rolstone, Morrowind is to Oblivion what Moby Dick is to the Da Vinci Code. No comment. So now that we've ended the main quest, Oblivion is over, right? It seems hard to justify a character continuing from here given the sheer cult of personality that would be created around a figure like the champion of Cyrodiil. To me, this is the problem with the urgency of Oblivion's introduction. If you roleplay the character, you can't really ignore the main quest, but by the end, how are you supposed to justify going back to the mundanity of the arena or Fighters Guild? Still, it's nice to see the remnants of the main quest. The closed Oblivion gates that dot the landscape, the battle-damaged temple district, the new statue of Akatosh, the leftovers from the Battle of Bruma, and a statue constructed in her honor. It has a unique method of determining what items to put on the statue. For example, it prioritized putting the Wabbajack in my hands over the ebony blade that I actively used. Still, I have one more thing to mention, and that was the time I crashed the game multiple times even with the unofficial patch and a crash prevention mod. See, there are tons of fun little staves with interesting effects that may or may not cause issues with how certain quests are scripted. So when I fought Mankar, I decided to go all out, maxing the difficulty to make up for minimizing it during the Battle of Bruma, and use most of the tools I collected at this point. Summoned a Daedra, cloned someone, resurrected someone else, used the Wabbajack to shapeshift someone, made use of all these fancy powers I've been collecting. I'm being general because I don't remember the specific details. Anyways, I'm having the slightest bit of fun with this fight, and of course it breaks. The first time seems to be because the game is checking to see when the daughters die to progress the quest, and since one of them is technically alive due to being reanimated, it broke. The second time the game crashed was when a clone of Mankar Cameron summoned a Dremora that shot lightning that hit the original Mankar, instantly crashing the game. The third time, I managed to be the one to land the killing blow and it let me pass. I'll tell you more about all those fun tools in Part 9 when we discuss the Daedra. For now, let's do the opposite. Knights of the Nine, Oblivion's first major DLC that most of its players will have actually played. A massive hole that was left in the design of Cyrodiil was in its religious core. Despite being the home of the Chapel of the Nine Divines, very little of the base game story has anything to do with the Adrix side of the Pantheon. You'll just have to notice that each of Cyrodiil's 9 major cities corresponds to a different Adra, or you'll have to explore the otherwise empty Arboretum and notice all the statues. This is kind of obviously a problem, since if there was any game where it was appropriate to actually explore the Imperial religion, culture, and history, this was the game. However, fans at the time were concerned about whether Bethesda was even going to make an expansion to Oblivion, seeing as they seemed content to just release the official plugins for sale. Still, Knights of the Nine would come out by the end of 2006, first being accidentally leaked as a PS3 exclusive questline called Knights of the White Stallion. So how is Knights of the Nine? Well, it's an 11-part quest series, making it shorter than most of the factions in the game, and I went from beginning to end in just over 3.5 hours, falling a little short of the 20 hours of content promised. Despite those massive limitations, arguably Knights of the Nine is a highlight of the Oblivion experience. However, I don't think it fares as favorably on the quality versus quantity spectrum as people like to think. Like most Elder Scrolls expansions, Knights of the Nine has a rough start. I guess it could be seen as a product of the times. Personally, I think they should have learned from Tribunal and Blood Moon, or any of the DLC released leading up to now, that assuming people of the future playing the game aren't just going to have the expansions installed from the get-go is a mistake. This more so applies to the plugins, however. Regardless, things start when we hear a rumor that the Chapel of Dibella in Anvil was attacked.
Are you here to end this nightmare and free us all from the Savage Garden? Everyone here died in the Master's service. As the Master promised, we are now immortal. But our life here is a nightmare. The creatures of the garden torment us endlessly. When they kill us, we are soon reborn, and the cycle begins again. He preaches in Anvil. Appeared right after the attack on the chapel there. Sounds like the usual doomsaying nonsense.
Anvil also has a new homeless man going by the name Prophet, claiming that this is a sign of the end times, so really nothing new. We're supposed to figure out that the rambling insane man is in fact the key to starting the quest line, our clue being his unique voice. He'll establish the ones responsible as Umaril and his gaggle of Aurorans. The Prophet then says that Umaril can only be stopped with the aid of the Divines, and that means the Crusaders' relics. If we say we're going to get the relics, the Prophet will ask for our resume, which is actually a trap, as Wes Johnson will demean you for every response other than humility.
And never let anyone forget it, champion. I salute you, yes. This small matter of the Crusaders' relic should be a trifle for a legend such as yourself. I apologize
for even asking the question. Most esteemed Master, please. Do not allow me to interrupt your quest for the relics. Oh my! The Grand Champion of all Cyrodiil? But surely there can be no better preparation for becoming a holy knight than a career spent slaughtering for the public's entertainment. And a worthy successor to Hannibal Draven, I have no doubt. I'm sure your arcane arts will locate the lost relics for you in no time. Well then, hail, hero of Kvatch! Let me add one more voice to the never-ending chorus of praise. I'm sure one of your many devotees will be able to guide you on your way to find the Crusaders' relics. And I'm sure you will have no trouble finding the relics on your own. You clearly need no aid from man or God. Why do you come to me for aid, worthy knight?
I know what the quest is trying to do here. I just feel that not making it possible to complete this quest without the submission part is cheap. Once we eat the prophet's ass, he's willing to point us in the right direction, telling us to complete a pilgrimage to Way Shrines of the Nine Divines. This is obviously a recreation of the quest Pilgrimage of the Seven Graces from the Tribunal Temple questline in Morrowind. The difference is that the Seven Graces were 7 fixed locations that shared various lessons in the lore and culture of the Tribunal Temple. The Way Shrines are generic, exist in multiples without any actual rhyme or reason to their locations, and only spout generic platitudes. It's possible this is a hereditary problem, and that Bethesda may have had issues with revamping the base game Way Shrines for existing saves that already had their effects and variables stored. As it stands, the only thing to spice this quest up is potentially running into a couple guys who are doing the pilgrimage. I didn't, because I had already gotten 6 of the Way Shrines in my adventure prior to starting this quest. If you visit all the shrines, and also very importantly call the Prophet Daddy, then you'll be approached by the specter of Pelennor Whitestrake. Unsurprisingly, a guy who died in the First Age has zero idea where his armor is millennia later and can only point us towards a shrine built on the site of his death. Since it's in a submerged Iliad city, the shrine is untouched, although centuries ago one Sir Amiel managed to almost reach the shrine. It's surprising that despite the criticism, Knights of the Nine is still willing to throw us into an Iliad ruin/Imperial sewer area full of the undead. Also, if you have high acrobatics, you can just pop the fence. It's pretty cool. This is also the point where the game decides whether you receive the light or heavy version of the armor. I didn't know this was a thing. I always just assumed the game would trust the player to play content called the Knights of the Nine as, well, a knight character. I mean, I understand not wanting to exclude players, but I think having slightly worse stats is preferable to variable armor weights. Or maybe his gear could be some kind of in-between of heavy and light. Is there a word for that? With the usual Elder Scrolls skill crunch, Oblivion decided to cut medium armor and unarmored. Unarmored is still in the game though, encouraged by spell effectiveness. Honestly, I think the skill crunch is stupid, and cutting unarmored despite keeping its mechanics and incentives in the game is asinine. Monks have been in fantasy forever, so I don't understand why we're cutting the core skills of their
Why am I in
class.
general?
Medium armor, on the other hand, has been cut entirely. Different armor types filled the niche in Morrowind of providing the player with countless options for how they approach designing their character. You could range from going naked to just running light bracers or a shoulder pad to full Daedric armor. The difference was all in your encumbrance. Less armor might mean an extra weapon or potions or more loot on the way back. How much gear you wore, or what combination of gear you wore, was a decision each player had to make in crafting their character. Oblivion changed things up by encouraging players to commit to an armor style. If you wear light armor, you might as well wear full light armor. Same with heavy armor or unarmed. The first 3 perks, or up to level 50 with armor skills, affect how quickly your armor degrades. We'll talk about durability in a bit. The 75 and 100 perks affect how much the armor weighs the player down. At heavy armor 100, which I reached, heavy armor had 0 impact on my encumbrance as long as I was wearing it. While I feel like this is a smart way of sidestepping the late game encumbrance issues, encumbrance has become an increasingly prevalent problem in the series, including the Fallout games. People don't like encumbrance because they don't like being told that they can't pick up everything, which isn't helped with the games increasingly encouraging you to pick up random trash that serves obscure purposes. Honestly, I think this is a UI problem. I was attentive and made sure I was routinely cleaning my inventory out of useless soul gems, potions, scrolls, and ingredients. But people who aren't as attentive are probably accumulating an increasing hoard of potions they then try to avoid using. And I think it's because it's easy to not realize how many you have with the newer user interfaces. Wow, this section's Tangent City. Point is, encumbrance has been shifted away from regulating how much equipment the player can carry to how much loot the player can carry, which would be understandably frustrating if Oblivion's economy didn't break at level 20. Still, it turns into a genetic problem for the series when you cut out the magical solutions to high encumbrance. Sure, being able to permanently boost your carry weight with Feather on the cheap was busted in Oblivion, and the design should be more so towards adding an additional weight for a short time so you can take all the loot home in one trip, but that's not grounds to give up on the spell idea entirely. But I do think I am onto something with this UI idea. You can only see 6 things at any given time in the Oblivion UI, and with the large number of potion types and sub-levels of potion types plus custom potions, it's pretty easy to realize you've accidentally been carrying a frost resistance potion for the last 6 hours. Part of it is a lack of variation, and potion design makes it so you can't tell which potions you do and don't
Your
want.
mic doesn't work? That's
Morrowind had
unfortunate.
5 different models and icons to distinguish potions, so you could easily tell what was probably cheap garbage and what was worth keeping. Skyrim addressed that problem by removing item icons entirely, although at least in fairness I can see more than 6 things at once in Skyrim's menu. That UI is for another day. For now, let's go tab by tab and discuss the Oblivion user interface. There is no more or less information to be gleaned from the Oblivion UI compared to its Morrowind predecessor. However, Morrowind had 2 different user interfaces. This godly PC user interface, and a panel-based version on the Xbox. Oblivion inherited the panel-based design, which is fine, I guess. I would prefer my old system of
I don't know, I got like
having all the information I need on one screen, but
30 in a
into
couple
4
days,
separate
so I
screens
think
to
it'll be
relay
alright.
More information is fine as well, except it doesn't. You can see your entire attribute and skill alignment.
Also, I
as well
did
as
post a
detailed
video
health
that
and
no one
magic
cares
key
about, so that'll
values,
happen.
with enough screen space to spare to waste on telling us our name and class. If we scroll the skills down, we can see our faction and ranks as well as our reputation and bounty. That's 4 different Oblivion screens in one panel. Oblivion's first panel tells us our base character information.
I was
The
not
only
at
reason you come
560.
here is if you've loaded
You
someone
are
else's
incorrect.
save or want specific information about exactly how much health, magicka, or fatigue you have. The next panel is entirely dedicated to the attribute page. There are 2 reasons to come here. You want to know what skills are under what attributes, or you want to see if your attributes are damaged. The next screen is the skill page. The smartest thing about this page is putting all the major skills on a single panel.
You are wrong.
This is one of the more useful panels you'll be coming back to, as it tells you the leveling progress of skills and what skills
I
are
pay
linked
attention to
what
my
attributes, so very useful. The next page tells you what factions you're in and what ranks you are. However, since rank requirements were removed, this is pointless
for it.
information,
Show
and there's
me.
no reason you wouldn't put this at the bottom of the same page where our name and class is, because the only reason you'll come here again is if you're loading someone else's save and need to see where they're at. The next page is the bulk of new information, which is the statistics page. The first section is useful information like days passed and the number of quests you've completed. Then there's this section about your skills that I really don't need to know about, and then at the bottom of this is your bounty, fame, and infamy. This would all fit neatly, except the Shivering Isles has an independent bounty, which means you have to scroll to see infamy now. It was so close and the expansion messed it up. The rest of the page is statistical information that 100%ers use to track their progress. It's for somebody, so it's fine. Next is the inventory screen, which wastes the first tab on an all items panel. Stop right there, UI scum. If you're only going to show me 6 things at once like the other screens do, then this is pointless. Here was the chance to zoom this panel out so we could get a bird's eye view on our inventory, and the individual tabs would be in the big text. Either cut this panel or rescale this text. Next is the weapons tab, then the armor tab, then the potions and ingredients tab, and then everything else is shoved into the right. Okay, cut the all tab and add a section specifically for scrolls, soul gems, sigil stones, and welkin stones, please. There's way too much stuff in this tab, especially compared to the weapons tab that could have just been combined with the armor tab because a lot of people just hotkey their weapons anyways. Whose great idea was it to have me scroll through all these keys just to get to the soul gems? Next is the magic tab. We have another useless all spells tab that only shows you 6 spells. Skyrim added a favorite system that would fit in better here since I have way too many spells to scroll through. The tabs are divided into how they're applied, so a target tab, a touch tab, and a self tab. Spells can be divided into either
I'll look at it
order or by
in
magicka cost. And pro tip, use
3
letters
lines
at
of
the start
chests.
custom spell names in order to organize
It's
them,
a bad
because
idea
otherwise
to
this menu will turn into a mess.
tab out of this
Between
game
this and the
because
miscellaneous tab, I have a
sometimes it
feeling
locks
I
up
know
your
the UX
fucking
designer
whole
really
computer.
doesn't use magic. The final tab is your active effects section.
So
Also,
it's best to
spell
do that on the
effectiveness is
title
just tucked into
screen.
the bottom of the screen here, just peeking out for you. Since an armor doesn't have a skill, I guess it has nowhere else to go, so yeah, homeless user interface elements. This UI is also wasting a lot of potential screen space for the benefit of showing the player character's goofy expressions at all times, except on the info tab. In other words, we could have had an intelligent usage of the entire screen, with a button on the inventory to glance at our character, and they even went so far as to use that idea, but not for the tabs that really need it. The final tab is for information, starting with the local map. You can't zoom, so you have to scroll this lumbering beast around to actually use this thing in dungeons. Otherwise, I approve. I'm torn on whether Oblivion or Morrowind had a better auto map. Next is the world map screen, and boy does not being able to zoom out make me angry. I'm sure you probably could at some point during development, and somebody used the command to unlock all waypoints and the map turned into a mess, so that's why we can't zoom out. It's just so claustrophobic. The best backhanded compliment I can give is that it encourages people to learn the map so they don't have to take so long scrolling around looking for their objective. One problem is that Oblivion's map does a bad job communicating elevation to the player, so you can't look at the map and come up with an intelligent plan to navigate mountainous terrain because all the map tells you is that the area is mountainous. Also, at the top is the name of the interior cell and a detailed breakdown of the date and time in case you were curious. I've never understood displaying the time in a UI that's paused. Surely it would be for an unpaused UI so the player could pay attention to what time it is in game. The next panel is the Active Quest tab, which includes a handy list of all your relevant journal entries and a button to take you straight to the map marker on the world map. Then we have the Current Quest tab, which lists all of the quests you weren't able to say no to before they got added to your log. And finally, you have the Completed Quest tab, which shows you every single quest you've completed. Naturally. You can even read old journal entries here if you want, although it's a shadow of the old book UI for the journal with its topic organizer. I've trashed this UI, and a lot of people do, which begs the question of who okayed it, and the answer seems to be Todd Howard. Specifically, when asked about what mods Todd uses for Oblivion, he answered interface mods. He goes on to talk about how they couldn't work out a good system for giving the player the choice between a PC and console scaled UI, so they went with this giant user interface for safety reasons. Here's your executive producer saying this is a problem as he's advertising the expansion to this game, as he's saying someone's already fixed it for free, and they've clearly tinkered with the UI to accommodate that expansion, hint hint, and they didn't try to fix it. Like what? Was a toggle button impossible? I know it took years of begging to implement a field of view slider, but come on. Alright, let's turn this around with some praise. Credit goes to Natalia Smirnova. I think your user interface art looks great. I can easily tell what each tab is supposed to be just from the pictograph, like how all the quests are 3 cups, the current quest is 1 cup, and the active quest has a hand holding the cup. Oblivion has a pretty clear and consistent visual design focus, similar to how Skyrim has a consistent design with minimalism. Don't let people criticizing the UX get you down. They just don't get that you were handed an interface and told to make it look good. It's very obvious you know what you're doing, and it's your boss's fault that you aren't allowed to design amazing PC interfaces as well. Remember when I promised we talk about durability for what, the 3rd time? So when I made the Morrowind video, that came with a somewhat controversial section about durability mechanics and intentional annoyances, and I've come to see the light. I still believe my original position. No, the light I've seen is why people were annoyed by this mechanic. It's fine in Morrowind, but I think a lot of people arguing against my point were doing so from the perspective of never having played Morrowind, and so we're imagining Oblivion where it's busted. Oblivion's armor skills would add these perks related to the way armor degrades in quality. Novices break their gear 50% faster, apprentices break it at quote normal rate end quote, and journeymen break it 50% slower. So when you start the game, your gear starts breaking faster than it did in Morrowind. Then you have the Armorer perk, which themselves start limiting the player. So novices and apprentices in Armorer can't repair magic gear, so if you have enchanted armor, you have to go to a services provider, which can be a pain because it means if all your gear is enchanted, you can't train Armorer in the field anymore. And then you add on top of ability. Oh, and armor and weapon stats are tied to durability. A sword at 90% does 90% of its normal damage rating. All of these factors mean that early game Oblivion is going to involve a bunch of broken armor, while late game Oblivion just forgets about the mechanic. I think this system has left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, which is significant if Oblivion was your first role-playing game back on the 360. What's funny is that Armorer level 75 is actually brilliant. At this level, you can actually repair your gear up to 125% durability, which increases its effectiveness. But okay, why should games keep annoying mechanics like durability around? It's a relic of the past with no place in the modern industry. You're being had. As I pointed out, there's not much of a difference between a hunger meter and a durability meter. Both are obstacles the player has to overcome with routine, preventative maintenance. Both are mechanics the player has to plan around during play. I'm sorry, but explain to me how it's unacceptable for modern RPGs to have durability mechanics, but it's fine when survival games do exactly the same thing, sometimes even with actual equipment durability. 6 million people bought Valheim and were clearly fine with playing a game with equipment durability and hunger. It's one thing to see equipment upkeep as annoying, and it's another thing to be happy at its removal because it annoys you. These people are actively celebrating the oversimplification of their games because they refuse to acknowledge the mechanical and emergent storytelling benefits of equipment durability. And I suspect they do that because they were emotionally annoyed at the one time they forgot to repair their stuff and had to suffer consequences for it. After all, durability mechanics form a negative feedback loop. You're implicitly biased towards remembering all the times you were annoyed by the system, and most people don't recognize the benefits as a result. But what possible benefit could there be? Scenario: your weapon breaks, what do? If the answer is load a save back in town and redo the trip, this time with repaired gear, you're a pleb. Video games are too complex for you. Go back to movies. The correct answer is adapt. If you didn't bring a backup weapon and are completely incapable of using fists or magic, find a new weapon. Retreat to a prior enemy who wielded a sword, or grab one of numerous spare weapons that dot dungeons. Did you think they were there just for aesthetics? It might be tough, but I'm sure you'll remember to keep your gear in good shape in the future. As a result, you'll be a better player, one whose character is actually forged by experience. A weapon breaking on its wielder is pretty dangerous. Do you know what else is dangerous? Archers running out of arrows. Should ammo be infinite to avoid the annoying mechanics of keeping track of your ammo supply? Should potions be infinite because it's inconvenient to get more and running out in a fight is dangerous? You might say that this hypothetical is absurd, except there are plenty of series which removed getting arrows for your bows in favor of having infinite ammo, or even keeping a supply of potions ready in favor of an infinite potion on cooldown. It's more likely than you think. Where do you draw the line? Are you going to celebrate when Elder Scrolls 6 doesn't have arrows or potions anymore? Where the Morrowind argument really started to get stupid was people saying that my logic was flawed because a CRPG with a focus on the minutiae of adventure focuses on the minutiae of adventure. It's somewhat disturbing the number of people who came to the nudist colony and then started complaining about how everyone isn't wearing clothes. Look, I get it's subjective, and you don't like it, which is why you play games that cater to your specific interests, and I play games that cater to mine. Where we have a problem is when you start demanding that my games change to suit your interests. I've never looked at a Call of Duty game and said, this is fine and all, but what this really needs is hardcore military simulation. Call of Duty fills a niche. It's an action title. It's remarkably simple because that's what the audience wants from it, to not have to think about it. I would change it, but at its core, my Call of Duty game is still an action title. Just like I would add prostitutes to truck sims, but not take away the truck driving part of the game to focus on the bisexual road trip aspects. However, unlike Call of Duty or truck driving sims, there aren't a lot of games purely like Morrowind. It's a niche. So when one of the few companies catering to that niche starts changing aspects of the formula to broaden the appeal by shaving off the edges, it stops being the original niche. It happened to the Daggerfall fans. It happened to the Morrowind fans. It even happened to the Oblivion fans, and it'll likely happen to the Skyrim fans. Not because any of our expectations were unrealistic. All we wanted was the same thing with less flaws. But because it was determined that not using the new accessibility features was adequate for the old fans, and finding mods to re-implement the old mechanics that were cut was an adequate answer to the old fans.
The other thing I try to do is that in coming off of Thief, which is a game all about stealth and sneaking, so it was like, how could I get some of that into Oblivion? You know, some of that, you know, how to try to capture a little bit of the charm of the Thief games. It occurred to me, I'm like, shortly after the game is released, the mod community is gonna do what they will. And sure enough, there's like a complete like Thief plugin with all of Garrett's tools from Thief. You know what I mean? Like water arrows and moss arrows and blackjack and all this stuff. So I sort of knew that was gonna. I was like, this is gonna happen anyway.
That's Emil Pagliarulo, a current lead designer at Bethesda, admitting that he has no problem with leaving it up to the community to add features to their games. Sir Emil's journal points at a priory where his order was based, which was centered around collecting the armor of Helena Whitestrake. This order was the titular Knights of the Nine. Using a ring we honorably looted off of Sir Emil's corpse revealed a hidden undercroft, and were confronted by both the spirit of Sir Emil as well as 7 of his buddies who proceed to try and kick our ass. Technically it's a test of worthiness, although I don't know if a guy wielding a quarter of the Daedric Pantheon's artifacts is worthy or just good at exercising with ghosts. It's actually a pretty cool sequence, barring the line,
Sir Knight,
In 300 years, none have stood against us.
How could I possibly not be the first person in 300 years to come down here? Getting here required a signet ring off your corpse, buddy. Also, ignore the fact that we're already a third of the way through the content. We're the Knight Commander of this order now and have acquired the helm and cuirass of the Crusader. 4 of the ghosts will start quests to find the other artifacts, but all 8 have some interesting information about the history of the Knights. As an order, their goal was to locate and safeguard the relics of Pelena Whitestrake. Surprisingly, despite being over 1,000 years late, they managed to recover most of the artifacts, but their fall would come when they began increasingly wearing them. Then the War of the Red Diamond happened, and the Order lost Sir Beric, who took 2 of the artifacts with him to Skyrim to fight in the war. Our job now is to travel Cyrodiil to piece together and fix the long-dead issues of the Order. Let's take a detour and discuss the soundtrack. Oblivion sees the return of Jeremy Soule, well-known video game composer who's worked on dozens of games over the years. His career becomes even more impressive considering how many scores he composed in just 25 years, scoring 8 different games to come out the same year as Morrowind, and 4 different games and 4 expansions to come out the same year as Oblivion. The number of jobs Soule took on slowed down in the 2010s, so he got more time to compose for Skyrim, hence why it has the biggest and arguably best soundtrack of the series. Not a lot has changed about how music works between Morrowind and Oblivion. Tracks are still divided between exploration and battle themes, which are played in their respective contexts. Start a fight, and the music immediately changes to a battle theme. End the fight, and the music immediately changes back to an explore theme. Oblivion would, however, add 2 additional modes for music, one for towns and one for dungeons. So now instead of hearing chirpy tunes and dank caves, music's more appropriate for the situation. It's still simple compared to modern music techniques in games, but this small change helps the atmosphere of dungeons quite a bit. Let's get into the tracks proper, most of which you'll have heard by now in the video. Oblivion's title theme draws heavily from Morrowind. Those uninformed in the topic of music took this as an insult when I showed how Skyrim incorporated themes from Morrowind, so allow me to explain how motifs work. Motifs are simple parts of music which provide part of the basic identity of the song you're listening to. For Elder Scrolls, this is a recurring motif. This musical idea is present in each iteration of the theme, not because Soule is stealing from himself, but because that's how composition works. Oblivion's theme is more bombastic than Morrowind's, however. Its highs are higher, but it also has lows. This single 2-minute song captures the essence of the Oblivion soundtrack by touching all 4 corners. The other 2 special tracks are for leveling up and dying, exactly like Morrowind. Alright, let's do the town tracks. Here's some snippets from all 5 of them to give you a feel for what town music sounds like. An idea reiterated upon from Morrowind is the idea that the comm tracks are not defined by percussion. I feel if anything has contributed the most to the mimetic element of NPCs in Oblivion, it's the immediately recognizable music that most people instantly associate with NPC hubs. On to the atmospheric tracks, which play when exploring. There are 7 of these, and here's a montage. Many people discussing this soundtrack comment on a car accident Jeremy Soule was involved in that informed the soundtrack of Oblivion. What they often leave out is that a third of the soundtrack had already been composed for the game, or that there were few revisions to the soundtrack. Jeremy Soule didn't just knock it out of the park, but wrote 2/3 of the soundtrack just from emotion he felt without any need or desire for revision. A thing I noticed is that because the load has been lightened, tracks don't have to cover as much ground as they did in Morrowind. A Morrowind ambient track had to cover towns, wilderness, and caves. It's easy for me to listen to this soundtrack because, thanks to its increased length, there's more variety. Speaking of caves, the new dungeon tracks. Oblivion's dungeons seem to be defined by long, dissonant notes. The notes sit so long as to be unnerving, until a roll of timpanis in the background reminds you that you're still trapped inside the earth. While over half the soundtrack is dedicated to town and exploration tracks, there are only 7.5 minutes of dungeon themes, and the similarity does lead to repetition in this respect. Is it possible part of the reason dungeons feel repetitive in Oblivion is the music? It's more likely than you think. Your brain pays attention to this kind of stuff. Finally, there are the battle tracks. think it's fair to say I know which third of the soundtrack Jeremy Soule had written before the accident. One thing I did note in the Morrowind soundtrack was that brass seemed to be the theme for the Imperials while strings seemed to be for the Dunmer. This dichotomy has shifted into brass being the sound of battle and strings being the sound of peace. One idea that I posited was that Soule didn't really care about the Morrowind soundtrack, as evidenced by the original titles versus the remastered titles after the game was successful. This is more likely than people seem to realize. Soule had worked on the Dungeon Siege and Neverwinter Nights soundtracks the same year as Morrowind, and while he did work on a lot of projects at the same time as Oblivion, his output seemed to slow down after the wreck, as though he started wanting to take more pride in the soundtracks he was working on. For Elder Scrolls, this culminated in the Skyrim soundtrack, which is not only longer than the Morrowind and Oblivion soundtracks combined, but is a masterpiece in terms of implementation into gameplay as well. Oblivion's dungeons are... well, they simply are. Dungeon crawling is a stated aspect of Elder Scrolls, a consequence of the tabletop translation. The issue is that dungeons are fun with friends at a table, but none of the TES games are cooperative without mods. Thus, the role dungeons have to play in the games requires necessary alteration to better translate them into a single-player experience. How you accomplish this has been a core issue the games have always grappled with. The easy answer is to set quests inside them, but many dungeons have no related quests. They simply are. The Morrowind answer then is to populate dungeons with logical groups of people. Cults, be they Daedric, Sixth House, or Vampiric. Many dungeons are also tied to serving as tombs, full of undead protectors. Even normal bandit dungeons are provided with some ceremony, usually tied to the themes of Vardenfell being a quarantined region with large criminal smuggling operations. In Oblivion, there aren't ancestral tombs, outside of vague reference in one of the Fighters Guild quests. There also aren't many Daedric cults, instead being replaced with generic conjurer groups in blue robes. Maybe those guys should have been Mythic Dawn. Vampire dens are also barely distinguishable from bandit caves. There are only 3 dungeon types that aren't caves: Ayleid Ruins, Abandoned Forts, and Oblivion Gates. The Ayleid Ruins are full of untapped Welkind and Varla stones centuries later, but no records of their civilization. Dwemer Ruins in Morrowind were always full of little mementos of their culture, random gears and cups and tools and armor and books. Ayleid Ruins become interchangeable once you realize the only variation is in the generic enemies you fight, not the stories the areas themselves tell. Abandoned forts are similar. There's no telling the age of each fort based on its design or contents. There were many empires that could have built them, but their cultures do not possess them. Oblivion Gates are not ruins, but their literal repetition, as well as simple characterization, also leads to them being generic. How do you make hell boring? Contrary to popular belief, Oblivion's dungeons were not designed by one guy leaning on copy and paste. But it isn't hard for people to perpetuate that legend anyways, because they feel like they were. It makes you wonder whether Bethesda got better at dungeon creation, or better at the illusion of good dungeons, and what the difference really is. The formula is pretty simple. The player finds an area, they go inside, find out what enemy type the dungeon is, and then either fight or run past all the enemies, looting all the leveled containers before exiting. There's not entirely an incentive to do dungeons for the money, because what are you going to spend it on? Training? And the combat is in a state that fighting for the sake of fighting also isn't fun. So the only thing left is the ceremony of doing a dungeon, but dungeons don't have ceremony. Dungeon diving in Oblivion is just doing quests without the context or rewards of doing quests. It's like Daggerfall, without the verticality. Quote, "There are plenty of very large dungeons to be sure, and we're trying to provide a higher density of content than we did in Morrowind." Gavin Carter, Source 10. On our quest, I start with the boots, which Sir Junkin sought and failed to retrieve. He doesn't have much information to share with us other than the location of a shrine of Kinnereth. This makes her the only of the 9 divines to have a shrine in the wild similar to the Daedric shrines, although it plays into her roles as a divine. We head over to the Kinnereth Worthiness Testing Grotto and get mauled by a giant bear for about 15 seconds before the test is complete. I guess the moral is, if a wild animal attacks you, you just let it happen, because Kinnereth has clearly decided your time has come. This would be fine, except Cyrodiil's roads are littered with critters. She's actually pulling double duty as nature goddess, considering her actual domain is the sky. Anyways, in the grotto are 2 friendly Spriggans in the boots. There's a free point of infamy if you try to fight the Spriggans. Wordlessly, the second we pick up the boots, the Chapel of Breville gets attacked by Aurorans. I always thought this was a weak point in the questline. It's supposed to be an escalation in the conflict and a driver of the tension, but chances are pretty good if the player does end up visiting the chapel before the end of the questline and the NPCs get replaced, they won't exactly know what caused the attack. And if you haven't visited the chapel, you might not even notice all the NPCs are different. And, well, even when we do know, there's not a logical line to follow. It's completely arbitrary. Next, I went to Leowen to get the mace. The guy will greet us at the door, telling us that he tried to get the mace but failed and mostly spends his days now protecting the chapel. He does have a pretty big fee for getting the mace, although, see, we pray to the tomb of St. Calidus and get transported to a void that requires the boots to cross. This is because Zenithar is the god of trades and commerce and thereby relies on Kinnereth's new nature motif to function. However, this also means that the Kinnereth quest is a prerequisite to this one, which is a cool idea. The player has a chance to diegetically fail the same way Sir Ralvis did, and let's be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if at least one person threw themselves off the ledge 100 times not understanding what they did wrong. However, against this general motifs, there's actually another way to get the mace. Once we leave, the Chapel of Devella is under attack from the Aurorans, and we have to fight them off. This can be particularly ugly if it happens to be Sundas morning during the service when they show up. Caridus is a big help though, and he asks to join our order after the battle. Of the original order, Sir Henrik was by far the most successful in that he found a relic, never used it for ill intentions, and then safeguarded it inside a fort which, to this day, has kept the relic safe. A bunch of conjurers have taken over the fort in search of the shield, but the traps and puzzles are just too great for what are generally the smartest type of bandit. There are 3 main puzzles to Fort Bulwark. The first is a pressure plate puzzle involving 4 series of 3 plates that require a specific combination to pass. Okay, less of a puzzle and more of a door code since there isn't any consequence for getting it wrong. The conjurers already figured this one out and placed candles to hint at the solution. The next puzzle is the Guardians. You'll spend hours toiling over setting the right orientations to— oh, just point them at the symbol in the middle.
Phrase kept coming up through writings I found. When the eyes of the Guardians are upon you, Julianos will show you favor. I'm not sure how, but I just know it's a clue for making it safely through these ruins.
The third puzzle at least has no obvious solution pretending to be a clue. This is Rodgar's equipment puzzle. A pressure plate in the middle will randomly highlight one of the statue's items. Each statue has an item but only shows up one at a time. At the same time, a random item is populated in the central chest. The goal is to match these items to the correct statues. This is only really difficult if you don't get the pen and paper out and just write down what statues correspond to what items, which of course means the conjurers would have starved to death trying to solve this one. Elder Scrolls has always had a complicated relationship with puzzles. A lot of people like to point out the simple matching puzzles of Skyrim, but honestly, that's not much of a simplification over how it's always been. Barring some stuff like the one where you drown yourself in Morrowind or the Blackrock Cave in Oblivion, which isn't a puzzle per se, but is just an obscure obstruction set, Elder Scrolls isn't really known as that puzzling of a game. The reason, I think, comes down to the fact that the designers don't want to stop the flow of a playthrough because someone has a challenging time with a puzzle. And I don't mean this from just an accessibility standpoint. I'm sure we can all think of at least one out-of-place puzzle in a game that did this. Elder Scrolls fits a generalist sort of niche, in that rather than focusing on doing one thing really well, it tries to do a lot of different things. And because this isn't a puzzle game, stopping the player to sit down and cogitate for a bit can be out of place. Then you add on that stipulation that everything has to be possible for the player who plays in 30-minute segments on the couch, and yeah, an incentive exists to not make the puzzles more difficult for the sake of the minority of players who want that. I think the solution looks something like this. Bethesda hires a guy who's good at crafting puzzles. Each Elder Scrolls game could incorporate puzzles, but with a clear design ethos that the only thing you get from them is optional rewards. So the player who knows that challenging puzzles aren't in their wheelhouse can skip them, and players who like completing puzzles can do them. Maybe a few side quests, a couple mages and thieves guild quests, and one main quest would incorporate these challenging puzzles. That way, when you have a quest where the difficulty of the puzzle has been a hindrance to progress, with this quest or the mages guild quest with the pillar, instead of making the characters look like imbeciles for not figuring it out, you could have an appropriately challenging puzzle. Otherwise, you eventually end up with the Blackreach puzzle. You know the one, where you spam the buttons and don't really understand what it is you're trying to solve, but it still has to be there to justify why the Elder Scroll hadn't been already recovered. With the puzzle down, we get our hands on the Shield of the Crusader and leave. I should mention Sir Thedric, but should I really? Regardless of if we meet him or not, he'll come to the Priory and ask to join our order. The excuse given is that we diverted the Conjurer's attention, but even if we stealth through the entire dungeon and steal the shield non-lethally, he still somehow escapes. It's not the biggest deal since stealth playstyles aren't really encouraged to play through Knights of the Nine, except for the fact that the armor will convert itself to light armor and stealth is only tied to infamy via its factions, not its playstyle, and the Legion magic is part of the actual Knight class. Our final quest for this leg is to get the gloves. Sir Casimir was a knight who went with Sir Barak to war, and this had changed him. He had this to say about the gloves.
I attempted to return to the service of the Nine, but the war had changed me. I no longer had sympathy for the weak or pity for the suffering. In the brief time I was there, I did more to hurt the chapel than help it. It was there that I was cursed. A beggar who came to the chapel each day for help tried my patience one too many times. I lost my temper and struck him. My blow landed harder than I had intended, and he fell to the floor dead, killed in the very chapel of the God of Mercy. I left the chapel at once, of course. Damage was done. I was weak, constantly weary, and lacked the energy to do almost anything. As proof of the deed, when I struck the poor man, the gauntlet slipped right off my hands and fell to the floor. Heavy as stone, they would not move. None could lift them. I suspect they lie there still, in Coral's chapel.
The setup for this quest is super interesting. The quest itself is not, and super questionable. The gauntlets are, as Casimir says, immovable. One of the priests, Erelder, tells the basic story and mentions that a descendant of Casimir is not only at the church, but has been forced to bear the same curse his ancestor received for his crime. We speak to Kellen, who seems convinced that Erelder is holding out information, as well as...
You've seen them, I assume. The only evidence of what happened so many years ago. Do you know that I thought perhaps I could lift them? That somehow this curse would be lifted if I could pick them up? I tried for hours, until my whole body ached, and I could barely move. I lay there on the floor next to them, weeping. I'm not ashamed to admit that. I've been at the end of my rope for far too long to be ashamed of anything. I've seen plenty of pity in people's eyes over the years. I grew up recognizing it. But with Erelder, there's something else there. And when he speaks to me, there are times I'd swear he sounds apologetic. Guilty. Why would that be? What reason does he have to hold back information?
Despite being a quest solely about talking to people, there's some great moments here. Erelder was holding out on Kellen out of selfishness because he knew full well that removing Kellen's curse would entail taking it upon himself. We're then given the objective to do so ourselves. Kellen's enthused and we're stuck with a damage fatigue effect for 3 quests. Alright, I've been holding back the criticism because I wanted to get the quest over with before we got there. Stendar, the Divine of Mercy, Justice, and Compassion, is apparently also into generational curses. At this point, not only has it been long enough that the priests don't really know the full story behind the gauntlets, which is odd enough given that someone would have written the story down like that somewhere, but Kellen didn't even know Sir Casimir, considering it would be around 10 generations in his past. This entire family was cursed in order to punish Casimir, just so that one day in the far future, someone could come along on a quest and find some magic hand condoms and have their willingness to show mercy tested. Given how simple the effect is, surely Kellen's family, or the church for that matter, could have scrounged up, what, a petty soul, and asked the Mages Guild for a ring of Fortify Fatigue? I get that Restore Fatigue was lost as an enchant effect after Morrowind, but if the Gale can have a magical widget to treat her condition, then I'm sure Kellen would have gotten something for his chronic fatigue. Never mind that the actual evildoer is being redeemed by proxy, or that there's no option to force Erelder to actually show the mercy he's supposed to as a priest of Stendar. Rewrite time. Kellen tries to pick up the gauntlets to take up the mantle of his ancestor Casimir, but gets hit with a fatigue curse as a result. Erelder's been holding out on the fix for his problem because his father was the guy Casimir killed. He's an elf after all, so it's easily possible. The quest is now about resolving the conflict between these two men. Ereldar has to learn to set aside his personal feelings and do his duty as a healer, and Kellen has to realize that his ancestor wasn't entirely noble and try to right the wrongs of the past. The player has the option to assume the curse, still, but if the player is successful, they can not only redeem both men, but can recruit both into the Order, and can see them develop a friendship as comrades as they overcome their generational grudges. With this leg of the quest done, it's time to return to the Priory with most of the Crusaders' relics. We'll find it's been repaired, and several of the people we've met along the way will ask to join the Knights of the Nine. While I don't see a reason anyone would ever say no, I have to at least appreciate that the player is being given a choice here. We also get a blacksmith, although with the unofficial patch, if the player doesn't speak to Sir Thedric here before this point, the smith doesn't show up. It's a bit comical to enter the priory to find it full of applicants. Anyways, a man named Lathon approaches us to tell us that Sir Roderick is dead. I didn't actually meet Lathon and Sir Roderick on this playthrough since they appear on the Wayshrine quest and I had done most of them already, so Lathon will tell us that he thinks Sir Roderick's dead even though we have no clue who that is. I think Bethesda has generally done a better job with stuff like this in Skyrim, although that can probably be attributed to more essential flags and less optional moments like meeting Sir Roderick. The way you fix this is to have a journal stage for whether the player has met Sir Roderick, and if they haven't, then Lathon's dialogue changes to an introduction and request for aid. He gives us the greaves that they had retrieved and tells us that Roderick fell attempting to retrieve the sword of the Crusader from under Paul Cave. This quest is just another dungeon run, but it's notable because it ends in us fighting Sir Beric, the man whose conflict with Sir Amiel ended the original Knights of the Nine. Sir Caius, one of the ghosts, says that Sir Beric's fall was his fault, as Caius had started and lost a fight with Beric, resulting in his death and corruption.
Sir Roderick, you were a brave knight and a good master. Long may your name be remembered in the annals of the realm.
Yeah, sorry kid, let me introduce you to something called the Creation Club. When we get the sword, the player is given the instructions to take it to the Chapel of Arcane Shadenhall to reconsecrate the blade. Lathon or Beric or even the Spirit of Pelinal doesn't tell us this. The player just intuits it and writes it down in their journal as the next step. This is just a reference to divine influence on the mind, or it's just lazy. After all, we have to go to Shadenhall in order to defend its chapel from attacking Aurorans. I'll point out that similar to the Mage's Guild questline where the Necromancers managed to sneak into Bruma and destroyed the guild hall without resistance or even notice from the guards, especially since my character at that point had brought Martin to a Cloud Ruler temple so the guards were on the lookout for cult activity, the chapels are actively being attacked without any of the guards putting up any resistance, in a post-Oblivion Crisis world where the guards aren't having to fight Daedra anymore. Hell, that raises the question of how the Aurorans are even getting here. The Aurorans, if you don't know, are Daedric minions of Meridia, as evidenced by the Daedric hearts they drop. We'll later be told that Martin's ban on Daedric invasions only applied to hostile invasions, but isn't this hostile? Or has Umaril been hiding in a ruin gradually doing permanent summons of Aurorans and building up a force for the day he would launch terror attacks across Cyrodiil? Another thing to note is the Restoration Master Trainer becomes inaccessible to the player after this quest if they don't have the unofficial patch, since both people who can give the player the necessary reference are scripted to die as part of this questline. Just to show how much thought Bethesda put into their trainer NPCs. With the sword purified, we have all the relics. Each of the artifacts belongs to one of the 8 divines, and in theory, each of these quests should have shown some of the lore behind these entities. The fact that the Cuirass and Greaves belong to either Mara or Akatosh says that this premise has failed, as most of the artifacts have a superficial connection to their respective creator at best. And even when we got a few detailed connections, it was something like Kenrith making us endure a couple swings from a bear, or Stendarr dishing out some Old Testament punishments for our benefit.
Okay, dude.
First, when we return to the Priory, we'll find that Wes Johnson has swung by to give a sermon to the Order. He gives the Knights of the Nine a quest to defeat Umaril. However, he states that in our current form will suffer the same fate as Pelinal Whitestrake.
With the apotheosis of Tiber Septim, the face of the divine was transformed. Talos ascended, and the 8 became 9.
Talos, via the Prophet, gives us his blessing, providing an edge against Umaril, although the Prophet has this funny line.
As a proven guardian of this realm, and a warrior the likes of which have not been seen in millennia, Talos grants you his sacred blessing.
The Champion of Cyrodiil, the Nerevarine, the Agent, and the Eternal Champion are all literally shaking right now. For fuck's sake, the Nerevarine literally got a blessing from an avatar of Talos on his way to fight Dagoth-Ur. The Knight of the Nine did a bunch of dungeons and talked to a bunch of people and is now a warrior the likes of which have not been seen in millennia. Maybe it's a subtle diss. Or I guess all the other protagonists are confirmed mages, who knows. So we rally all the knights at Garlus Malatar for the final battle. This quest actually broke the first time and I had to go back to a prior save because for some reason one of the triggers wasn't firing and so I couldn't actually advance to the ruin. It's a shame they didn't reuse any of the assets from Paradise to make this area a more pristine, maintained alien ruin. I mean, the interior cell of Karakagailor was one model, so I guess they would have had to create a bunch of new interior models, and that was just too much work. Plus, the DLC was 155 megabytes on 2006 internet, so adding a bunch of new models so one dungeon could stand out would have been wasteful. None of your companions are essential, so the player may be motivated to try and keep everyone alive, but there's not really any benefit to doing so. Honestly, it makes the game feel a little more believable if these named NPCs do end up dying in the fight. Aside from the compulsive looting, the final battle with Umaril is alright. The problem with making a final battle focused on the melee side of Oblivion is that it's more Oblivion melee combat. Mind you that this character has maxed out the heavy armor skill and was using Blade for the entire main quest. I'm basically primed for this. So Umaril fighting like a giant copy of the other Aurorans is pretty sad. Umaril is an Iliad sorcerer king whose father was a divine, and he also has the blessing of Meridia. This guy is begging to be the battle mage boss and deserves to have more than one spell to his name. What's the point of even having him be weakened by the divine aura of the armor? Is it to reward the player for wearing the armor from Knights of the Nine when fighting the boss of Knights of the Nine?
All of this is to assemble every Crusader relic so we can go and kill Umaril. Except I forgot to bring most of these items with us to Umaril's hideout, so we had to fight him the conventional way.
Umaril goes down easy, and we use Talus's blessing to pursue his spirit. The second phase, where we fight him in the sky, is exactly the same mechanically, but the arena is way better and it's much more enjoyable to have a second go at him. With Umaril finally dead for good, we fall back to Tamriel and awaken in the Undercroft of the Priory.
You had no wounds on your body, which we did. I saw it with my own eyes. You did not draw breath.
Thedrit, how long has my brain been deprived of oxygen? Thedrit gives a short speech to the knights announcing our victory, and with the armor placed on the rack in the Undercroft, Knights of the Nine has been concluded. Or is it? There's one character left to mention. Whitestrake is the original Divine Crusader of the First Era, is both one of the main characters of Knights of the Nine and almost completely irrelevant. If your knowledge of this DLC was limited to Tez meme culture, you'd assume that Pelennor Whitestrake would have been the main focus of the entire story. Instead, the characters of the original
What
Knights of
hack
the
is
Nine, like
this?
Sir Amiel and Sir Barrack, got way more focus and screen time.
This
than
is a
Pelennor
custom
Whitestrake.
mod.
And this is an
Or
order
it's
that was
sorry,
found
it's a
over
custom. It's
millennia
just a custom
after
map.
Pelennar's death. Indeed, most of the lore surrounding the Star Maid Knight exists pretty much entirely within the Song of Pelennor, an 8-part Kirkbride story that the player can find in the chapels when they have this expansion installed. Most of the dialogue the actual Pelennor Whitestrake we meet has refers to our quest for the relics, and he has little light to shine on himself beyond the line,
"Your need must be great for the gods to allow us to speak." Has Umaril the Accursed found a way back? The foulest of a foul race. 1,000 curses upon his unholy name. I thought I'd won, but I should have known. The slave masters are a cunning breed. Umaril found a way to cheat death as I could not.
So let's discuss the Song of Pelennor. The first 6 parts come from a Riemann manuscript. Part 7 comes from an older manuscript predating the fall of the Elysian Empire, and Part 8 appears to contain a fragment of the original song. It goes something like this. Pelennor appeared, something immediately being apparently odd about his arrival. His personality, his phenotypical description, and his armor are big signifiers that he wasn't of that era. Theories vary from possibly being a time traveler to being a manifestation of the divine will against the Iliads and their enslavement of mankind. When Pelennor Whitestrake gets
Yeah, I don't
defeated as a
really.
Terminator with a laser cannon, yeah, that's
I'm
a
gonna
interpretation
farm all
of
the
the
hybrids
song.
legit. Like
However, given that the Elder
I
Scrolls' favorite
do
character
eventually
is
want to
the
farm
unreliable
Croft
narrator,
for
it's also possible that Pelennor was just a normal guy with albinism who happened to be blessed by the divines and won every battle he fought until the
the
last
Nemesis
one that killed him.
Invader.
That characterization is a lot closer
But,
to the man we see than the Terminator
Right now I'm
figure
lazy,
in
so I'm just doing this.
And for good reason.
I
Cops are
have a
likely given
perfect,
the most charitable of racial characterizations, especially in
like perfect,
Oblivion, where
quote-unquote.
all of them share 2 voice actors. If you told me there was
Bone
a guy
Shredder
out there
hybrid.
wiping
I
the
got that
smoke off their
yesterday.
faces, I'd ask for a link to his Patreon. This brings us to the concept
Not
of
that
the
it's like
Shezarri.
insanely rare. but-
Shezar was the Cyrodiilic version of Lorcan to the elves and Shor to the Nords. It's generally believed that Lorcan, since his supposed death, has been wandering Tamriel in various mortal incarnations. Some of these are substantiated by the lore, but a lot of this comes down to that it is yet to really make the cut
I've done
through the
my
series
fair
following
share of
the
armory
2010.
runs, for sure.
It's disappointing to me that Kirkbride wasn't really given the time to fully flesh out the history of Cyrodiil's various empires. He tries his best. We get quite a bit more content on the Aelids and their history and culture. We also learn more about Elysia and Mora House, like how despite all the man statues and man armor, Mora House was actually a minotaur. It's just a shame that pretty much none of this is actually conveyed to the player through the questline itself. I'm not going to offer a redraft because that would require a foundational restart on Knights of the Nine. Instead, I'll do what I'm best at, tearing stuff down by making unfair comparisons. Knights of the Nine sits in the same position as Tribunal and Dawnguard as the story expansions of their respective games, but how do they compare? Tribunal featured a 19-part questline that tied up the fate of the Tribunal and King Helseth, leader of Morrowind. This wasn't like Knights of the Nine, which stretched out quests into multiple parts, like how the Faithful Squire is literally a single conversation. Tribunal's quest actually raises the bar for Morrowind, while Knights of the Nine rolled around in the mediocrity.
I've actually
Knights of the Nine is also set in Cyrodiil, unlunlike Tribunal's new location.
I've never beaten him
Dawnguard would continue this
solo
trend,
on PC.
basically
I
taking
beat
place in a
him
few
like
hidden parts of broader Skyrim.
once with
Although
my
Dawnguard
fucking
would
dad
also
on
provide
Xbox.
2 exclusive quest lines and factions
But
to
it's
choose
been a
from,
while.
a rework of Werewolf
I
and
definitely, I
Vampires,
think I could
new
go
areas like
kill
the
him. Like
Soul
I
Cave
have.
and Forgotten Vale. I
Look
mean,
at this
sure, it's not
fucking.
fair to compare Knights of the Nine
Look at this
to a DLC that would come
anaconda
out
masher I
decades ago,
got.
But it is fair to say that Knights of the Nine didn't do for Oblivion what Dawnguard did for Skyrim. That wouldn't happen until Shivering Isles, which is a
I got an
way to
Unforgiven
game.
masher, but it sucks
And
ass.
It's going to be a forever
The stats on
away
it
as
are
the
so
Holidays
bad.
DLC.
One of the towns will have Yesterday. So on Yesterday, you can go to town and all the crimes in the town are 50% off. So you get caught doing a crime and a guard comes to arrest you, you pay half as much as you normally would because it's kind of everybody screwing around.
It's like 300 damage or something. 320 something, I think. And it's 3 mag. Do you have anything for the back shots? Got this.
If you've been following the trajectory of
In the
our player
fucking
character
vendor.
and maybe looking ahead at future sections, then what's about to happen is a very confusing heel turn. Before I played Oblivion, I laid out an outline of the order of quest lines I was going to do, and I had several ideas how I could justify the transition. I think the core of the problem is that people are assigning moralities to factions inaccurately.
Dude,
As
what's
the
my
prophet points out, the arena
what's my
isn't
pearl
exactly
luck?
a
I've
morally
gotten
great
like
place to work.
3
The
doing this
Fighters Guild
twice.
is about snuffing out free market competition, and the Mages Guild is so
I'm
incompetent
doing
it
this
has
one,
become
like
dangerous.
once and that.
The main quest is guided by ends justifying the means. The players
Yeah,
never
and
assign
it's
their
extra nice
motivation
because
on what
like
they assume the champion is Cyrodiil's motivation to be.
it's kind of
And
hard
Knights of the
to
Nine is
farm the
often
fucking
more of a good story
penetrator
in
in
the game,
original,
and even that is
considering
full of
it
its own questionable
the bug
So
rarity.
the only difficult part of our character starting the Thieves Guild is
Like I don't know what the
justifying
fuck
why
it
they
looks
returned
like.
to petty crime.
Well, like I kind of do, but I can't really differentiate it
I
super
kind
well.
of had to do the Mages Guild between
I'm
levels
just all
15 and
snipers.
25 to be at the right level.
So
to
yeah, that
realize
was a nice
all the
find.
rewards would still have magic effects apply properly, and the next two factions don't exactly involve a lot of leveling up in Oblivion. Really, in terms of writing an Oblivion character who does every faction, it makes the most sense for players to start with the
Yeah, I
Thieves Guild
mean,
or Arena after breaking
fucking,
out
I
into
could
the
try to
city
kill
prison
him.
at
I've
the
never,
beginning, which is why the condition
been a while.
that
I don't
the
even
player
remember where
gets
it is.
invited to the Thieves Guild for doing
Oh, hey.
time never sat well with me.
This
personally.
is less pearl I
Yeah,
needed.
you
Are you
could
watching
approach
for
people if
Glob
your
Good
crime wasn't
variants?
thievery related, even, for instance, murder. We'll talk about the weird world of crime in Oblivion, don't we?
I have this.
Another path in the guild is to talk to City Swimmer, a beginner-level sneak trainer living in Breville and drawing attention as the resident
I have
stealth
this one too.
specialist. If she's still alive, she'll point you in the direction of joining the Thieves Guild, despite not being a member herself. The assumption, I guess, is if the player is seeking out sneak
This thing
training,
sucks, it's
then
just
they
rare.
probably want to be in a faction involving stealth. Even though by itself,
And I have,
sneak isn't only tied to a thievery
I think I have
lifestyle. Still, that's a
3 or
fine
4
difference
mega
to work
cannons. I
off
think
with
it's
the guild.
4.
The last one is to read one of the wanted
I mean, it's
posters
from
in
doing
the
this,
box
so
and then
like,
to ask and convince a beggar to point
I've
you in the
never,
right
I've never
direction.
gotten one from like
All
an
roads lead
actual
to a place called the Garden of
armory
Darloth in the
chest.
Waterfront District at midnight. It's weird because the Darloth thing is only referenced after the conclusion of the quest line, so trying to use it as an actual clue is impossible at this stage. That said, since the Waterfront District has 7 buildings and Armand
I have
has
here.
3,
I'll show you my
it's not
fucking
exactly
bank
that
after
difficult
this.
to locate. People like the Thieves Guild introduction of Oblivion.
I have a
because
bunch of
it's
shit
not
on
as
it.
weak as Skyrim or Morrowind's introduction. In Morrowind, you just walk up, ask to join, and you're in, which would be fine if the main plot of the questline wasn't about dealing with a rival criminal syndicate.
I have
In
every
Skyrim, you
type
can't
of
enjoy the
grenade
market
except
area
for
without getting propositioned for
I need a
steal.
corrosive
I
longbow
feel a
still.
reference system is more
That's why I
appropriate for
keep
a
checking the
Thieves
ammo
Guild. Steal
vendors.
enough and maybe you impress a member and they end up referring you. In fact, that's basically what... Hang on, I have to look it
Also,
up.
I've never gotten an
In
ogre.
fact, that's basically what Brynjolf does for the player after we impress him. The only thing I would change are the circumstances necessary for meeting Brynjolf in the first place. Like maybe the player needs a certain number of stolen items to their name before Brynjolf extends their offer, decides to hold a contest for the chance to join. Where to steal a journal by
The
stealing
firebomb
items,
spawn
whoever
on
brings
Atlas
it back gets to
badass.
join the guild. And get
Is the
this,
chance?
we're not just given a quest
I mean,
marker to
I
follow,
guess
we
you
know where to
probably.
go.
I don't know if
For
you
about
know.
5 seconds
Is
before I
it
keep
more or
homeless
less
dude
rare to
discovered
get
the
it from a
constant
badass
fiber
in the
to where
chest?
guy lives. Then I get not only a marker to the guy's house, but to the specific drawer where he keeps the journal. This path may not be as obvious for the player who didn't
I mean,
pay a homeless guy for the clue
I've
related
opened
to his
thousands
skills, but not to
of these
despair.
chests.
You could technically steal the journal off Meth Redhill. No, seriously, her name is Meth Redhill. You could pickpocket it or even loot it out of her house because for some reason she doesn't
Oh, if
immediately
you've,
bring it to Armand. Instead,
on
wait
the
at
off
least a
chance that
day
you
or
haven't,
possibly
like,
2 to do so. Should the player
seen
still
it.
manage to fail this incredibly forgiving test, Armand will extend an exclusive offer to instead steal a
It's pretty
sword from
fun.
the shop. Methredale is given the second chance if and when we succeed, and Amisai, the third contender, is left out to dry, at least until way later in the questline.
Montius Selectus was killed during a burglary.
It's so weird to me that all the Eridian weapons like suck.
I'm Amantius Selectus, the writer.
Wait, what? So, now we're in the guild. Let's talk about the massive Thieves Guild rewrite that occurred between Morrowind and Oblivion. The person
Because like, how does that get through QA? How does like, cause they're generally pretty cool. But like, how do you release a game where like you have an entire weapon type that's really cool and sucks total balls? It's so weird.
Unsurprising since the
Like,
Elder
I can't
Scrolls
imagine how
was
that
making
happened.
a computer version of Tabletop. Also, TSR had basically gone defunct by that point and would be bought out by Wizards of the Coast in '97, so, well, that was also a factor. I'm going to put this bluntly. It feels like Nesmith took one look
Yeah,
at
I've
the
seen the spawn rates,
questline in the Thieves
the
Guild
drop
and
rate
said
for
that
it on
he wanted
Loot
that to be
Lemon.
an entire faction. There's a telling quote, too.
Todd Howard asked me to create and present a quest line for the Thieves Guild, so I put together a rambling presentation of the 20 quests I had planned in the meeting. I got one sentence out before Todd stopped me.
Tell it from the player's point of view.
I had gotten so wrapped up in the backstory that I was telling, rather than the player's story. By the end of the day, almost half of the quests had been cut, making it much better.
Yeah.
Then, I've never forgotten
I literally, it's almost impossible for me to run out of fucking SMG ammo.
In essence, Nesmith may not have been entirely to blame for the Thieves Guild making a heel turn from pseudo-official criminal
Like,
syndicate to
it's
Robin
my
Hood.
Hellfire.
If you don't believe me, well, this quest is about bringing a guard to justice for taxing the poor of the waterfront. This quest is about stealing
Oh, I
a
don't have my.
statue, planting
It would help
a
if I had the
sugar, and
class mod
turning
on,
it in and returning
probably.
the statue to its owner. This quest is about recovering a stolen ring that belongs to a widow and returning it to her. This quest is about stealing items from the Mages Guild to call guards off searching the waterfront and then return the items. This quest is actually about stealing a book and then not returning it, but involves helping a friend in need. This quest is about getting the guard captain harassing all the poor people in the waterfront, reassigning.
Yeah, that was 10 ammo.
The quests are made easy when you tip the homeless for a
Holding
tip in
it down.
return. The player is also actually forbidden from stealing from the poor, which includes everyone in
It
the
would take me like
waterfront and
several
agriculture
minutes holding it down to run out of
that
ammo.
It would be lucrative to do so. Oh, and speaking of rule changes,
Second, never kill anyone on the job. This is
Yeah.
the Dark Brotherhood. Animals and monsters can be slain if necessary.
now in principle, having this as a rule for the writers and designers is a good
What's
thing.
kind of funny
Having
to
this
me
as a hard
is
rule
that
for
of all the
players. The
SMGs,
Morrowind Thieves Guild understood that things happen on the job.
I'm
Like,
pretty
the time
sure
the Mages Guild was supposed to
damage-wise,
be empty,
my
but
best
one of the
one is
members
just
stayed
this
behind to
fucking
protect the hall and tried to kill us
Torg
so
Double
we could enter.
Anarchy.
It's
Or
not like
Steel
Morrowind
Anarchy,
didn't have the
whatever.
capacity to check if NPCs are still alive. Thanks
Like,
to the
this thing
text-based
does
dialogue, I could literally
stupid
make a mod in an
bullshit
hour that would
damage.
add a check for this guy's health and a penalty if the player kills him without any kind of extra scripting. In fact, one of the first missions you get in Balmora does exactly that, because there's no point in stealing a key from a dead man who won't produce future goods to
I mean,
steal.
it's only good up
Hell,
close,
a
of
couple of
course,
the missions
but
involved carrying out hits on enemies of the Thieves Guild, including high-ranking members of the Fighters Guild, in the interest of preserving the faction. Now, there is a reason you want the player to typically avoid murder. All of those interesting stealth sequences are somewhat invalidated if the player decides to rush into the room with their axe, just murdering all resistance. The way you handle that is to make the NPCs in the quests especially prone
pretty
to
good roll.
placing trespassing bounties for getting caught and murder bounties for killing. Note that this is functionally the same system as the blood price, without the arbitrary rules. Money-minded players are going to look at a quest where they got a 3,000 gold bounty and only 500 gold out of the
Yeah,
job,
that's fair.
and decide
I don't use it most of the time.
This way you can design the quest
I
around
mainly
how
use
the
it
player
for,
decides to handle
I mean, I
jobs.
use it for like
Make a habit
bone
of
shredder
killing
farming.
orcs on the job. The Thieves Guild earns a reputation as a bloodthirsty syndicate.
But generally,
Maybe the guards put up
my
more
favorite
resistance
weapon
in the
is
future. Maybe the public
well,
uses
I
the
was
system,
using this for
like
a
the
long
chaos
ass
system
time.
from
Look at this.
Dishonored.
This
Nemesis
isn't quite perfect, but it really is close enough.
It also shows that Bethesda's prepared to account for the player killing these NPCs. I don't think
This
it would need
SMG
that
is
much
so
extra
good.
disk space to include lines and scripting for the player making a habit out of murder. Fail to play along with the Men in Tights charade and you define the Thieves Guild as just another dirty criminal syndicate. Maintain the Grey Fox's public relations focus
But yeah, it's
strategy
kind
and
of
honor
unfortunate.
reputation
The
instead.
legendary
Even
SMGs
Jim
in this
Stacy
game are
admitted that resurrecting the Valor
underwhelming
Admiral
compared
was a
to
PR
non-uniques
stunt to
for the most
ingratiate
part.
themselves
Like
with the
the
threat.
Wildcat just
You
sucks
can even
ass.
do
The
it where
Savior
darker path leads
has
to the Civil
underwhelming
War
damage.
which is pretty
The
good
Hellfire's
as
really
far as
good,
mechanical
but
choice
it's
in games
locked
go,
to
but
only
it's a lot
fire,
more than what we got, isn't
and
it?
the Tsunami's a pearl,
Okay,
so
fine.
like
Let's do a quest. In order to get our first job, we
I
need
do
to
like the
find 50
Tsunami, it's
gold
cool.
worth of items. I enjoy the premise of having the skill to get future jobs, but the player only has to steal 1,000
yeah, I
gold worth
used
of
I
items
used
to
to check
unlock all the
SMGs
quests,
a lot.
which is extremely easy to do in Oblivion. That and access to fences is restricted by
I still
rank.
check them sometimes, but I haven't
assume
gotten the
idea
better
is
one.
to
I have a
protect
really
the
nice
higher
double
level
one too.
fences, but let's say that we followed the progression.
I
of
have
the
two
quest
really
where
nice
we
double
went
ones
through and
actually. I
did
couldn't
the
decide
theft
between them,
phase.
so I just kept them both.
That means each leg
Because I used
involves
to
a
save
trip
editor
to
to give
another
myself
city because
like
an
1,000
imperial-based
bank
organization has
capacity
no resources for fencing goods
and
in the
like 500
Imperial
backpack
City.
just
Is anyone still doing
because
a
I
no-fast
can.
travel
Single
run
player
at this
game.
point? Still, I think the premise is a fine idea. Gating thievery-related quests behind, well, thievery is effectively a soft faction skill requirement. It's no substitute because you don't have to do that much stealing to be considered a master thief, whereas a hard skill requirement of asking the player
I've
to
kind
say,
of
skill level 70
always had a habit of increasing my carrying capacity in games if I can.
Our first actual job after fencing 50 golden
I'm a bit of
items
a
is literally
hoarder.
called untaxing the poor. Hieronymus Lex, a guard captain we actually met after the final battle in the
But
Timber
collector
District,
sounds nice,
went
so we'll
around
go
and
with
collected
that.
taxes from the poor in the waterfront as a message warning them against
Oh yeah,
corruption
yeah.
like
I guess
Grey
there's the
Fox and
bitch,
Thieves
which is
Guild.
just whatever.
In retaliation, the Grey Fox wants both the money and
Like
the
you can
tax
just get
records
you
from
can
the
get a
map.
better non-unique.
Simple as. Technically, you're supposed to wait for the shift change, but you can actually just run through the various levels without getting a trespassing bounty. That's because lockpicking
that sounds pretty good.
work to be far less nuanced to skill than its Morrowind's predecessor. In Morrowind, this is what lockpicking looked like. It doesn't look impressive, but this system would have actually played
Oh,
really
yeah.
well in Oblivion. The chance of succeeding in lockpick
I have a
depends
I
on
have
several
actually I don't
factors.
think I have a
Skill
corrosive
level,
non-unique.
lock level, the lockpick quality,
The fucking
humidity,
flare
and
gun,
the
this thing
curvature of
sucks
the
ass.
earth. All of that would be calculated in real time, so when you attempted to break into a house, you ran the risk of getting caught by a passerby. However, Morrowind's
I wish the
passerby
Gasher
only
was
consisted
good.
of NPCs randomly
It's kind of
wandering
just whatever
around,
because of the
unlike
burst
Oblivion,
fire.
which actually has full radiant AI. NPC
The damage on
locations
it's
are now
actually good,
determined
but
by
like the
time of day
burst
and
fire
activity, and yet the lockpicking
is
system has been reduced.
like the
This
accuracy
isn't
is just
just
so
about the
shit.
minigame, this is about the fact that lockpicking now freezes time. The trick here is to begin lockpicking the door to the captain's quarters in the half-second interim where the guards are loading into the current room. Because I managed to start the minigame in that brief moment of time, I'm now free to fail as many times as necessary to get in. If we had Morrowind system here, it might take me a couple attempts, in which time I would be caught and...
Stop! You violated the law.
Now, of course, you could just propose we take the current minigame and make it real-time. One, that would be kind of awkward because you lose the ability to check your surroundings during attempts, and two, the minigame has
Eridian
its own
only run.
problems. So there are some tumblers to unlock doors and
See, the thing is,
the number of them depends
if I
on
want
the
to challenge
difficulty of the lock.
myself,
If the tumbler goes up fast, it'll break the pick.
I play a
If it
different
goes down
game. I
slowly,
play
it'll
one of
stop.
the other Borderlands
It's a
games.
simple game.
I'm
You
kind of
interface
playing
with a
this on a
buddy and your
break
cursor
from
tends to get
Borderlands
stuck
3
inside it.
because I'm in
However, if you
endgame
don't
in
like
it,
playing then at level
and
2 you can unlock Colonel's Quest, which
I
involves the skeleton key. We'll discuss
it's
the
fucking
skeleton key later, but
annoying.
the skeleton key basically
And
allows you to
endgame in
coordinate
this game
and
is
spam the auto attack
much less
button until you
annoying, so
complete it.
I'll just keep
Since
it less
the skeleton
annoying.
key doesn't break like normal lockpicks. It also boosts your security 40 points to
Or I
increase your
play
success
Geometry
rate.
Dash. That's my main
In
game.
essence, you have the option to turn off the minigame. That's no
If I really
wanna
wanna
challenge
challenge
the Morrowind
myself.
skeleton key, which was a super high quality lockpick that could bust open almost anything, but only had 50 uses. Okay. Oblivion fans who didn't play Morrowind.
See,
There
I
were
just
different pick levels with different degrees of use.
for that I
And
just do
Apprentice
like
pick had a
Jacob's only
quality of
run.
1, while a Master pick had
I
a
love
quality of
Jacobs.
1 to
Jacobs is
4.
my favorite
That doesn't
manufacturer.
sound like a lot, but
Probably
it is
not
a
in
big
this game,
modifier
but in all the
improvement.
other ones.
The skeleton key had a quality of 5. That's how much better it was, which is why it was the in-game thieves.
You know what though?
And I suppose that
Pre-sequel
brings us to the
actually
other
has
minigame of
pretty
the
good
game,
endgame. The
Persuasion
only
Con.
issue is there's like no
To quote
fucking
Tim
content,
Rolston,
but the
There
balance
were
is pretty
many
good.
mini-games that were proposed for Oblivion. That was a period of time when mini-games were really, really cool.
There are a lot of opinions shared about Persuasion Pie and how it's bad, but nobody ever really explains
Okay, I'm gonna
why. You can give an anecdote about how it's weird.
shut
if
this
you-
guy up. Okay, if you didn't notice that I'm playing music from Pre-sequel right now. Look at this fucking tsunami I have, by the way. It's nearly perfect. Yeah, I keep all my pearls. Let's see if I have some stuff in here that's interesting. This is a really nice Unforgiven I got. I said, well, yeah, I'm fucking. You also don't have the 1 billion lance chest map, so you know it helps. And yeah, here's my Unforgiven Masher that sucks ass. Dude, I got fucking 3 mag on it. It's the worst possible mag to get. 2, ideal. 6, I would have been fine with. Lowest damage. Fuck's sake. It's such a depressing Unforgiven Masher. Anyway. I'll just move on from that. It's fucking 3 mag. Which, where even is it? I keep all my Unforgivens. Which, like, what? Yeah, 2 mag has highest base damage. You wanna know what 3 mag does? It boosts elemental damage. That's what 3 mag does. So glad I got that. Check this out though. This may be the rarest thing I have. Level 69 Reaper. I have this shitty. Actually, let me get rid of that. I have a way better one of those now. Oh yeah, that's my mega cannons. I'll deposit this one with it. Yeah, I have a bunch of random stingers. I have a bunch of doll ones for if I use the professional mod. And then yeah, I have perfect bone shredder, normal, perfect bone shredder, hybrid. Perfect in quotes, of course. I don't know about like the internal stats or anything, but damage, fire rate wise, this is as good as it gets. I don't think it can vary much though, really. It's mostly level. But that I also could be wrong about that. And I kept this because it's called a Crimson Lance, which I thought was funny. And then yeah, I have like good versions of every class mod for no real reason. I have perfect versions of many of them, actually. The one I have on right now is also a perfect mercenary. I don't... Okay, here's another one. I have like 2 perfect ones. Cause yeah, the one I have right now is +4 Quicksilver. Every grenade mod. Oh yeah, some pearl shields. Oh yeah, I got an ironclad I can put there. And I have like every type of shield pretty much. Also, all at like 2400-ish capacity, except for this one because it has the highest recharge I've ever seen. Also, it's level 69. I got it from a fucking vendor. Didn't I get an ironclad? The fuck? Okay, never mind, I guess. Weird. Maybe I can't imagine that I picked it up and then 7 exited too fast, but maybe I did. Doesn't matter. It wasn't better than my highest capacity shield anyway. I wish pre-sequel had more endgame content. Cause it probably has my favorite story of all of them. There's just like nothing to do in endgame. There's one fucking raid boss and it's just a harder version of the end boss. Okay. It's possible I didn't fucking pick it up, but I was pretty sure I did. I kind of just wish they didn't suck ass, all of them. But yeah. That would also be cool. Maybe even both things. Well, that would be cool. Yeah, I didn't know that. Oh yeah, the Orion's sick. I have a pretty good one. It's level 66 though, lol. What is, this is, I think this is Helios music. Yeah, it's research and development. I was right. One thing that's really cool about pre-sequel, I don't even know if 3 does this. It might. But a lot of like even like all of the story characters and even some of the side characters like have specific dialogue for each specific Vault Hunter. Like obviously like in all the games your character has like their own responses, but it's not always just, you know, to the exact same shit, which is cool. 3 probably does that, but I haven't noticed it. I probably haven't just haven't played enough of 3 to notice that. The only game I've played multiple characters of on PC is 2. What do you think of 3? I like hearing people's takes on it. Ah, fair enough. It's worth pirating. Really, pre-sequel? I feel like pre-sequel endgame isn't that bad. But to be fair, I played it on a community patch where you can actually farm stuff. Because, like, there's a lot, like, there's dedicated drops for most items. So I probably had a lot easier time of it than vanilla. Yeah, pre-sequel is my favorite storyline easily. Maybe not easily, but I really like pre-sequel story. Like, pre-sequel puts... It's narratively interesting to play every character in pre-sequel because they all have some backstory related to the games. More so than in any of the other games. I mean, kind of in 1, but they're, like... your characters are boring as fuck in 1. They don't talk at all. In pre-sequel, they're very expressive. I mean, 1 doesn't even keep all the fucking same voice actors. Hey, cool. Now it's level 68. Clearly you haven't seen the 3 storyline. Oh, that's a really fucking good hammer. What the hell? This is just exactly the same as mine then, I guess. Okay. Yeah, True Vault Hunter is fucking brutal in 2. And pre-sequel if you're not farming. Although, see, the difference between 2 and pre-sequel is 2 at max level with the best items possible, you still get one-tapped by like bullybongs. And this is not true of pre-sequel. Pre-sequel actually has fairly balanced combat if you have super good shit. So if you farm a lot, pre-sequel actually is pretty balanced. But if you don't, it's hell. Hi. Oh yeah, I have this equalizer masher too. It's really good. I mean, you know how fucking common equalizers are, so I have pretty much every version of an equalizer. I have them in like all the elements. Just cause. I have a 6 mag masher as well. Oh, cool. I don't think this is particularly good, but Thunder legendaries are rare. Ish. I'm kind of decent at doing those. I know you can like bind jump to scroll to get them every time, but it's lame. I like actually doing the frame perfect. On my Bone Shredder hybrid drop, I actually, on the kill, well I guess before the kill, I got the I got that jump, which is cool. Actually, like kind of a cool kill. I wish you could get like anarchy versions. It wouldn't really make sense based on like how the parts work for some of them. But I wish you could get like an anarchy versions of the legendary SMGs, like an like anarchy bitch or a savior or something. Anarchy Gasher would actually probably be good. Because it would fucking shit out so much ammo that it barely matters that it's burst fire. It's also kind of disappointing there's no like... You'd think there'd be like a double anarchy legendary in Borderlands 2 or 3 or something. Like, you know, you've got Maggie from Ashers, but as far as I'm aware, there's not really like a double anarchy. I mean, there might be in 3 that I just don't know about, but... There's definitely not in 2. Pretty sure this is Veins of Helios. I don't think I'm talking to anyone anymore, but fine. Let me look. I'm not losing it. Yeah, I was right. Oh, sorry. No, I was wrong. It's the Vents of Helios. Sure, this doesn't sound similar. Yeah, it says 1 viewer. But like it always says 1 viewer, so 1 viewer kind of means 0. But YouTube is like really bad at having an accurate viewer count for some reason. Twitch is much better at it. It's funny, I used to be at I mess with my like backpack amounts semi-often and in the save editor, so I see like what my money number actually is instead of just the 9s. I was at money cap for a while, so I stopped selling shit. Money cap, by the way, if you were curious, is $1 billion exactly. But I've died so much and just not sold stuff that I'm down to like 600 million. Something I've never liked about this game. How do you track how much you have without dying doing math? If you open up your character in a save editor, you can see it. But like, that's like for the exact number, but generally just be like doing the math on the fly is, you know, easy and sufficient. I guess I haven't really gotten anything this run, I don't think, so I'll keep going until I do. That's what I usually do. Anyway, I think it's really stupid that the only way to get level, that like, the highest level things can drop from like chests and craw is 68. So the only fucking way you can possibly get level 69 items is from vendors. I think it's crazy that that's how it works. Like, including in the remastered, it's still like that. This is gross. Well, I mean, vendors would always just have like the item in the vendor is always max levels. It's worth checking vendors when you're doing like chest farms. Like in Borderlands 2, for example. I still generally check vendors when I'm farming. So I disagree. And you know, I check vendors in 3 all the time, and it's not like that. Vendors just have like a weird, like, I mean, they already, even at base level, have like a strangely high legendary chance, but I'm pretty sure like when you get higher level, they also get better. But like, yeah, there's other ways of doing that that don't make it so the chance to get an actual perfect weapon is even more absurdly low than it already is with everything being world drop only. Like, not only that, but your best possible chance of a world drop, besides from a vendor, is 1 level under perfect. Like, okay. I have a wildcat with 0 accuracy. I'm not sure if it's a bug or not. But I have that, which is pretty funny. Cool. Let's go do an actual armory run. Been a while since I've killed Nox. Oh, the shield I have, I mean, I hesitate to say it's bad, but it isn't it's not like necessarily ideal, but it'll be fine. Oh yeah, also, I have this masher. So I kind of I kind of worry about getting an Unforgiven masher because it's going to be really hard to beat this thing. But yeah, I have that. And I mean, since I'm probably going to end up using the Penetrator and I have this Anaconda Masher, I'm probably just gonna end up using the professional class mod anyway, so the Anaconda's gonna be better regardless, I think. I don't know. The bonus crit damage... No, the bonus crit damage on the Unforgiven, if I got like one comparable to my Anaconda, actually would make it better, I think. But, you know, that's assuming I fucking get one. And also it kind of, I don't know, it kind of either one-shots or it doesn't. Should I even bother opening the red chests? I guess they, yeah, I mean, they can have legendaries, so I guess I will. For doing an armory run, might as well. I really like that in this game you can damage your vehicle by slamming into shit. Well, yeah, it's just, you know. Logically doing the run is a huge waste of time when I have the... Even the white chest. Yeah, I know those. Yeah, those ones too. The the New Havens ones don't. But yeah, I've gotten legendaries from those ones. Yeah, I guess I'm not really farming pearls specifically, so there's no reason to only open the lance ones. How's this Masher go? I mean, it's alright. If I was Mordecai. The tsunami will be good though. Well, let's do every chest, I guess. Fun fact, I haven't actually done I didn't get the Terra fucking check off. I may actually, I might get a Spectre class mod for doing Kara the first few times. Cause it's not like Mercenaries really gonna help me. If you boost up that whole thing, you slam into that rock and fall down. It's very sad. This jump is a fucking scam. I'm not risking it. Not really, not too much. Hey, Lance Assassin. I don't really, the driving in this game is like really clunky. Alright, I won't save quit. I'll come back out here after I do the thing. Come on. This thing is interesting. I completed a new challenge somehow. Beginning to think the tsunami isn't actually very good. Or at least against these enemies. Yeah, I'll probably stick with this for Nox. Yeah, actually, after we do this, I'll go back and yeah, I tend to just use nothing. Or like a pestilent defiler. Yeah, I just don't feel like fucking waiting for it to reload, man. Anarchy would probably work better. Oh yeah. Okay, bye. Be funny if you could get like if like Nox is gold had a hybrid. The fucking gun. Come on. There we go. I'll do this first. I always do. I missed that. Oh, I think we got RK5 fight. Yeah. I love this song. I hate this fight, but this song's really good. Oh yeah, well, there you go. Fight chest legendary. It's not even about equalizer. I always thought it was interesting how these walls like don't exist at all. It's such a weird design. Like, why is it like that? Fucking, there we go. Fuck. Dangers of pressing buttons you can't see. The Firehawk is a super funny gun to me because it's just like the Hellfire, but repeater and worse. I'm not sure who's used. I'm like, what build is the Firehawk for? That's 2 from whites. Alright, where am I going? Okay. Oh no, I was gonna get a Lancer. I don't think I've done that mission. Oh, you mean, like going over that thing? I have done it. It's just hard and I usually die. Although you can help me. I don't remember. How the fuck do you get to, how do you get to Kraz's lair? Epic fail. Yo! You know what? This is better, actually. Hello, I am under the water. My grenades went nowhere. Still in nowhere. Are you coughing in my ear? Okay, thanks. I can't hear you even a little bit. Just so you're aware.
Damn it.
Oh, I heard that.
Dang it.
I'm gonna fucking unstream soon anyway, actually, so. Okay, I don't really want to be in that. Forgot I was in that call and don't want to be anymore. Can I get on this? No, none of it's solid. Fuck. Yeah, see, the fucking issue is the grenade bounces on the ground and I don't. Alright, whatever. I can't get in this car. Well, I guess the waypoint probably leads to it. was gonna say I could farm Ajax while I'm here, but I don't actually have the mission. Or, you know, farm as in kill once. So it's in the next map. Or the previous map, I suppose. Ah, it's over there. I knew there was something this way. I was over here like forever, like a while ago, and I was like, I swear there was like something over here. So, but I think I could have, yeah, I could have driven probably, but it's fine. What's the best way to deal with the fucking maggots? Elemental of each type. It's unfortunate that I don't have that. I mean, I probably do, but not of like SMGs. I'm probably just gonna give up and then end stream and go to bed because I'm tired, but you know, we'll give it a solid couple tries. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I still have this. Here, let me just throw that out. Hellfire, obviously. Mongols suck ass, dude. No thanks. I guess Tsunami. I don't know. I don't fucking remember how he moves, so I don't think this is gonna go very well. He gave me the Pearl tooltip I'm loading in here. Interesting. I don't remember how the fuck to actually, like... Where do I go? Is it out of here? Is it somewhere else? Did I take a wrong turn? Oh. Well, no, I didn't. Oh, button. Missed the button. This did look like the thing, but I couldn't figure out how to activate it. The travel time seems unnecessary. Seriously? I could also just sit on the ledge and kill him, but that's boring. The zoom on this thing is like, it's like 1.0 or something. Yeah. The zoom on this is higher. Yeah. Significantly, in fact. Hey, bud. Nailed it. Damn. Ow. Okay, bye. Yep, wrong gun. Yeah, that ain't it. Yeah, that makes sense. Nailed it. Okay. I'll use like an actual SMG, I guess. It's the wrong fucking gun, retard. Excellent. Yeah, I'm just gonna go to bed. I'm not extremely prepared to do this. I'm gonna put my shit away though. Yeah, no problem. I'll be streaming Borderlands a lot more probably, because I have 8 more hybrids to get, and a lot. Well, you know, 2 Eridian legendaries also. Also, I still haven't gotten a fucking ogre yet. Still. So that would, you know, I'd kind of like one of those. I didn't check the vendors. Level 69 perfect ogre now. Maybe next time. My music stopped? It did. Guess it doesn't matter.